We continue the Gemara today on Daf Ches Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara continues the discussion brought up based on what it said in the Mishnah, B'mideh she'adam moedid ba moedidim lai. Hashem behaves with a person measure for measure. And here the Gemara will bring this as it relates to the Saita. The Mishnah said some details about it, and the Gemara adds more, and then it will bring, there's another Mishnah and a lot of other details on this subject. So we find this idea by a saita should be midah shemodada, the measure that she measured, in other words, with her behavior, ba modadullah. This is what Hashem measures for her, and this is what Hashem says to do, that is, for the saita. She stood at the opening of her home to expose herself to this man. So the kayin has this woman stand by the gate of Nikner, the entrance into the Azara, Umara Kleina Lakel. And there he shows her embarrassment to everybody. He persaloi sudrinoin, she spread for this man beautiful sheets or beautiful coverings, that is, al reisha, on her head. Lefichach kayin neitel kappa mal reisha. So therefore the kayin removes the covering from her hair. Umanicha tachas raglea, and he places it under her feet. He kashtale panea, she beautified her face, lefichach, and therefore what happens when she drinks the water of the saita, if she was tamei, panea meirikais, her face changes colors and turns green. He kachlale einea, she beautified with her eyes, lefichach einea beltes. One of the things that happens to a saita when she drinks from the water is her eyes bulge out. He kalalaya saira, she braided her hair beautifully for this man. Lefichach kayin seiser saira. The kayin takes out these braids. He had a salebeds, but she signaled to him with her finger. Lefichach tziparnea noishris, and therefore her fingernails fall off. He chagra lebet silsul, she dressed herself and put on a beautiful belt. Lefichach kayin mevi chevala mitzri. The kayin has to bring a chevala mitzri, which is a belt that the kaishala lamayla midadeh, and she ties her garments above of her breast that it shouldn't fall down. So here in this Gemara, it seems like that this chevala mitzri is specifically to cause a disgrace for her. Gemara before discussed whether it's just about holding up the garments. He pashtalei yirecha, she spread herself out for him, spread out her thighs. Lefichach, therefore, the first thing that happens is yirecha nefeles. When she drinks the water, her thighs fall. He kiblas al kreisa, she received them on her belly. Lefichach bitna tzava, her belly will burst. He achilase madane elam, she gave him from the delicacies of the world to eat. Lefichach karbana ma'achal beima, the carbon she brings, unlike the other karbanis of mincha, is always brought from chitim, from wheat. Here it's brought from barley. He ishkeseyu yayi meshubach, she gave him to drink from wine, from good geshmaka wine, the kaisis meshabachim, and beautiful glasses or goblets. Lefichach kayin mashke mayim amarim b'mekida shalcheres. The kayin gives it to drink from these bitter waters, where the scroll of the Eibishter's name and the psukim are put in it and are erased in it, and it's in a mekida shalcheres, in a earthenware vessel. He also saw b'seiser, what she did was done in hiding. Yeshe b'seiser elya in samba upon him. Hashem, which is Yeshe b'seiser elya, sits in a hidden place. He will put his attention upon her to punish her. Shanema, there's another pasuk that says, V'ayin noyef shamra neshef, the eyes of one that's a noyev, one that behaves inappropriately, waits for the evening, for nighttime, lema, and he says, like to shireni ayin, that nobody will see me. And that's when I could do an Aveda privately. The Gaimer, the continuation of that pasuk there is, V'seis upon him yasim. Hashem will put his face and his attention to punish this individual. Davar acher, another pshat regarding this last point there, he asasa b'seisa. What she did was privately. Hamaka im pirsama b'gali. And the Eibishter publicizes this, that it should be revealed for everyone. Shanem, as the pasuk says, Techase sineh b'misayin, Techase sineh b'masha'in, Tegale ra'asei bakal. So she was covering what she was doing, and Hashem reveals what she did, for it should be open for everybody. So the sinner, what's hated for Hashem, she did privately, and Hashem reveals it to everyone. So this is regarding the Saita, where we see Midah Keneged Midah. Now the Gemara comes back to Psukim that were mentioned before at the end of Ches Amud Beis, where it brought one pasuk. So the Gemara now asks, Ma'achar, now since the nafkale we brought before that we learn out me'achas la'achas limtzei cheshbon. The pasuk says achas la'achas, Hashem counts one, another one. In other words, Hashem counts the avedis of a person, and He takes a full count. And the Gemara's expression before was every pruta is mitzdaref to a count, and then Hashem punishes. Doesn't necessarily punish for each individual aveda. So if we're learning that out from this pasuk, so the other pasuk that was brought before, ki chosa'in soyan, from this pasuk as well, we see that Hashem takes little measures at a time, and then Hashem gathers them together, birash, and then there's a punishment that comes upon the person, lomali. Why do I need this second pasuk, which seemingly is saying a similar thing? So the Gemara answers, l'chemida. Like the Gemara already explained before, this pasuk of Kichosa and Sayan is not only coming to say that Hashem gathers one, and then He punishes the person, but it's also coming to say the midah keneged midah, not only when it's a big measure, like the other pasuk which the Gemara brought, the Gemara brought a pasuk where it said Sa'asa, but even Sayan is saying for every small, tiny measure, what a person does, Hashem is very particular in punishing the person measure for measure. But now the pasuk Gemara's question is, if we have this pasuk that says that Hashem pays back measure for measure, even for the tiniest thing, so the other pasuk that was mentioned before, that that when there's a Veda, there's a big measure for an Aveda, and b'shalcha, Hashem sends away this person that sinned, tirivena, Hashem fights and punishes, lamali, why do I need this? If I already know from the other pasuk that Hashem pays measure for measure, why do I need the pasuk of Bisasa? Answers the Gemara, Likid Rav Chinana bar Papa. So this pasuk is actually teaching me something else, like what Rav Chinana bar Papa said. Rav Chinana bar Papa, Eina Kodesh Baruch Hu Nifra Meno Uma. Hashem does not pay and punish a nation for its misdeeds ad shas shilucha, until it comes a time that the entire nation should be completely eradicated from the world. Shanem, as we see here in this pasuk, Bisasa Bishalcha, that when it's a very big measure of misdeeds that this nation does, and then Hashem is ready to completely expel and get rid of this nation altogether, then Tirivena, then Hashem fights and punishes them. Ask the Gemara on this. But Eini, is this true? Rava said, Shloisha Kaisis Ha'amurim b'Mitzrayim. There are 3 cases that are said regarding Mitzrayim, and this is in the dream of the minister that was in prison, and Yosef is the one that interpreted the dream. But over there, in that dream, there were 3 cups. What are these 3 cups hinting to? Lama, Achas, Shashasas b'mei Moshe. 1 cup is a cup of punishment that the Mitzrayim drank in the time of Moshe when Yidden were redeemed from Mitzrayim. V'achas Shashasas b'mei Pari Nechai. Another is the Egyptians drank this in the times of Pari Nechai when Nebuchadnezzar came and conquered Mitzrayim. And va'achas, and the third, that it will drink together with its friends, other nations, that will be eradicated when Mashiach comes. So we clearly see here that Hashem eradicates these nations, and not necessarily that do they get eradicated only when it's time, but certain periods, like you see over here with Mitzrayim, Hashem punished them, then He punished them again, then punished them again. So therefore, each one in there, it's not only when it's time for them to be fully eradicated do they get punished. So the Gemara says, if you'll argue and say, Hanoch Ozdu, those Mitzrayim that were there in Mitzrayim at that point, they're gone. Vahani Achrini Nino. And here, these Mitzrayim are others. They're not the same. So therefore, the ones that were eradicated, Hashem totally wiped them out. It's a different nation that's living in Mitzrayim. It's not the original Mitzrayim that were there in the time of Moshe. But Vatanya, we learned in the Braisa as follows. Omer Rabbi Yehuda said, Minyamin Geir HaMitzri Hoyali Chaver Mitalmidei Rabbi Akiva. There was a ger. His name was Minyamin, and he was a ger from Mitzrayim, a Mitzri, and he was my friend from the students of Rabbi Akiva. So now, Oma Minyamin ger Mitzri. This Minyamin, this ger said, Ani Mitzri Rishon. I'm a Mitzri, and I'm a first generation Mitzri. V'nosasi Mitzris Rishona, and I married a Mitzris, a first generation Mitzris. So what I'll do is as follows: Asi Livni Mitzris Shnia. So the halacha with a Mitzri is that Layavai B'Kal Hashem, he cannot marry into Klal Yisrael until the 3rd generation. So therefore he says, let me marry off my son to a Mitzris, a 2nd generation Mitzris, Kidei Sheyehei Ben Bini Mutalavi B'Kal. And then my grandson will be allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. So we clearly see here that this is Years and years later, after Yidden came out of Mitzrayim, in the time of Rabbi Akiva, and Minyamin, which was a ger from Mitzrayim, was a ger considered to be a Mitzri from that time period, and the Isser of Lo Yavi Mitzri B'Kal Hashem applied to him. So we see that it's the same nation of Mitzrayim that, even though they were wiped out by the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, there was remnants from them, and that nation rebuilt later, and therefore we see that Hashem did not fully wipe them out. Okay, Rashi actually brings here that this opinion here of what Minyamin Ger HaMitzri said argues with what the Gemara says in other places, that Sancherev came and Bilbul Umais, he went and misplaced all people, and therefore we don't anymore know which nation is where, and therefore this Mitzri, he was a Mitzri, could be a Ger from the place of Mitzrayim, but we can't determine for sure to know that he's a Mitzri. But our Gemara is not following that opinion. Ella, says the Gemara, so itme hachi itme. Going back to the way Rav Chanina bar Papa darshan the pasuk b'sasa b'shalcha. So rather, the way he darshaned it is as follows: Omer Rav Chanina bar Papa, en HaKadosh Baruch Hu nifra min hamelech. Hashem does not punish a king. So we're not referring to a nation necessarily, but to a king. Atshas shiluchay, until it comes time that he should be totally sent and eradicated from the world. Shenema, as the pasuk here says, b'sasa b'shalcha tirivena. When it's a big measure of Avedis, and then it's time for him to be sent, then Hashem fights and punishes him. Ameima, Masnilo, the Lahad Rav Chanina bar Papa, Ameima taught this point that Rav Chanina bar Papa said, he didn't learn it out from this pasuk B'sasa, but he learned it out from the following pasuk. What is the meaning of the pasuk where it says, Ki ani avaye lo shinisi, I Hashem do not change. V'atem b'nei Yaakov lo kilisim, and you Yidden have not been eradicated. So what does this mean? Ani avay lo shenisi means lehikesi lo'uma v'shenisi la. I did not punish a nation and then repeat again. Meaning, when it came the time for them to be eradicated, that's when Hashem punishes them. V'atem b'nei Yaakov lo kilisem, and you Yidden have not been eradicated. What does that mean? V'hainu d'chsiv, it says in another place, chitzai achale bam. Hashem says on Yidden, my arrows, I will finish on them. What does that mean? Chitzai kolon, Hashem's arrows finished, but v'hei mein and kolon. The Yidden are not finished, because when Hashem punishes Yidden, it's very different than nations being punished. For them, they're not the purpose of creation. So when they're being punished, they are being eradicated from the world altogether. When Yidden, chas v'shalom, are being punished, it's just a cleansing process in order for Yidden to do tshuva and to come and return to Hashem. So therefore, Yidden are not ever being eradicated. On the contrary, this is just a cleansing process for Yidden. Amar Rav Amnuna says, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu nifra min ha'adam, Hashem does not come and punish a person at shetismale sasai, until he fills a certain point, it comes a certain point that he's deserving for this punishment. Shenema, the pasuk says, B'mloi sifkoi yetzelei. When he fills a certain point that it's full, then yetzelei, Hashem causes it to be the punishment, then the tzara comes to the person. The same I might have mentioned before, so he darshaned another pasuk. What's the meaning of the pasuk where it says Rananu tzadikim b'Hashem la yisharim nova sihila? That the tzadikim sing to Hashem, and then it says la yisharim, to the ones that go on a straight path, nova sihila. The simple pshat of the pasuk is nova sihila. It's beautiful for them to sing for Hashem. So here we say al tikri nova sihila ela nevei tehila. Rather, read the pasuk nevei tehila. What does that mean? Moshe v'David, this refers to Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, shalei sholtu seineim b'maseiim. Their enemies did not have any control when they came to conquer in Eretz Yisrael, and they did not touch their actions. In other words, their handiwork, which is Moshe Rabbeinu regarding the Mishkan, and by David HaMelech, his home where he lived. The Chsiv, as the pasuk said, David, that is, by David HaMelech, the Chsiv, the pasuk says, Tovu ba'aretz sha'areh, that into the grounds, the sha'areh, the gates of his home, sunk into the ground. Moshe, regarding Moshe Rabbeinu as well, the Almamar, the master said, Mishenivne mikdash rishain. When the first base of Mikdash was built, Nignaz, Ayalmayit, Krashav, Krasav, Brichav, Amudav, Adanav. So all the different parts of the Mishkan were all hidden. The Ayalmayit and the wooden walls and all the brackets, everything, all was hidden. Heicha, where was it hidden? There were caves under the Heichal, and that's where they were placed. Tana Rabbanon, coming back to the Saita, so we learned in the Braisa, Saita nasnene b'mi she'ein roi. The Saita, she placed her eyes on a man which is not fitting for her. law. Again, law, not fitting for her. Masha biksha leinitin law. What she requested and what she wanted is not given to her. Umasha biyada. And what she has in her hands, not lu mimena, is taken away from her. And because this is the rule, person places his eyes in something that's not his. Masha mevakish ein noisen loy. What he wants is not given to him. Umasha biyadai noitel neimenu. And what's in his hands is taken away from him. So this is an additional point besides the midah keneged midah. We see over here that not only what she wanted, she does not get, but even what she desired, what she has, that is, what's in her hands, is taken away from her. And as Rashi explains, what this refers to is that not only does she not have that relationship with that man that she put her eyes on, but even her own husband that she had before, she loses because she loses her ksuba and she has to leave from her husband. Similar, we find regarding the Nachash, the snake, in the beginning of creation, he placed his eyes in something that was not his. And Rashi here says that actually he placed his eyes on Chava to have a relationship with her. What he wanted was not given to him. And what he had was also taken away from him. As the Gemara describes here, what it is that he had that was taken away from him. Hashem said, I said, that he will be the king over all animals and beasts. And now, he is going to be cursed from all animals in the world. I, Hashem said that he should be walking upright. But now he will have to go on his stomach. I said, Hashem says, that he should eat like a human being. Now he just eats dust. Hu Omar, the snake said, Eric is Adam, I'll have Adam killed, and I'll marry Chava. Now instead what happened was, there's a hatred between a snake and a human being. This concept that when a person wants something that's not his, so he also loses out what he had until now. We find this as well, but regarding Cain, as Rashi brings there, Cain was interested in marrying the extra twin that was born together with Hevel. And that's why he was punished and his life was shortened. And Kairach wanted to have the kahuna that wasn't his, and it was swallowed in the ground. And Doeg, which was a great person in the times of David HaMelech, one of the great students in the time by David HaMelech, and he had jealousy from David HaMelech, and in the end, he said Lashon Hara on David HaMelech, and he also passed away young. And the same, similar with Achitophel, he also was jealous and wanted to have the kingdom, and he had reasons to believe why he would be the king, and he also died young. And Gehazi as well, he also desired money that wasn't his and was warned not to take, and he wanted to have this money, and it became a Metzora. And Avshalom desired to be a king as well. And this was David HaMelech's son. We'll learn about this later, but Arichas over here regarding Avshalom, and he also died young. And Adoniyahu as well, so he also desired to marry Avishag, which was David HaMelech's wife, and he also died young. Uziyahu as well, which was a king, and he wanted to be a Kayin. Even though he wasn't a Kayin, he wanted to be a Kayin, and in the end he got a tzaras, and he was removed from being a king altogether. And Haman, and last is Haman as well, that wanted to kill the Yidden, and he was hung on a tree. They all placed their eyes on what was not fitting for them. What they wanted was not given to them. And what they had in their hand was taken away from them. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah regarding how the Saita, the punishment happens to her and how she bursts, her body bursts. So the Mishnah said, because it's the thighs that began first with the pleasure of the Aveda, so that's the first that's affected by this waters that she drinks. So from where do we know this? If you'll say, the Pasuk says, the Pasuk says that first your thighs will fall, and then it talks about the stomach bursting. So that's the order, first the thighs. But the question is, Vaksiv, in another pasuk it describes, her stomach bursts, and her thighs will fall. So it's the opposite. The stomach gets affected first. Abaye answers, when the Kayin is cursing her, telling her what's going to happen, so he's first cursing the thighs and then the stomach. Because that's the order of how the Aveda happened. But umaya ki when the water actually enters in her body and when it has its effect on her, ki batki. So it goes in the way as the water comes into the system, which is beten bereisha, first in the stomach, and v'hada yerech, and then it affects the thighs further down. Fragt the Gemara, but the Klola Namiksiv, when it talks about what the Kain curses her with, the pasuk there also says in another pasuk, Latzpeis beten v'lam pil yarech. First the stomach bursts and then the thighs fall. So we see there as well that this is the order, not the thighs first. Answers the Gemara, Hahu the Maidala Kain. That's not the actual curse that the Kain is telling her. The Kain is just notifying her how it's actually going to happen. The beten bereisha v'hada yerech, that first the stomach bursts and then the thighs fall. So then people shouldn't say, look, the water is not working in the order that the Kain said it would happen. The actual curse is corresponding to the order of the Aveda. But then he lets her know what's going to actually happen in the order, the way the water comes into her body. Zok Mishnah, continuing the subject of the idea of midah keneged midah. Shimshon halach acha einov. Shimshon followed his eyes. Lefichach nakru plishtim es einov. Therefore, his punishment was that the plishtim poked out his eyes. Shenema, the pasuk says, vayechzuhu plishtim vayanakru es einov. They grabbed him and they poked out his eyes. Avshalom nisga b'sayrei. Avshalom held himself great with his hair. He had beautiful hair. Lefichach nitla b'sayrei, and therefore he was hung by his hair. Ulefishu bal esa pilakshi aviv, and because he had a relationship with 10 of the concubines of his father. Lefichach nit nasnu by esa lumbiyais. So there were 10 spears that he was killed with. Shanem, as the pasuk says, vayisvu asara anoshim, or this lashon of here, asara anoshim. The pasuk it really says asara na'onim, the 10 lads, naise kliyayav, and they with 10 spears they harmed him. And then another thing he did was lefisha ganav gimel gnevis, because there were 3 thefts that Avshalom did. And what is that? Leiv Aviv. This is the theft of deceiving his father. Right? He told his father that he's leaving and he's going to bring korbanos. And really, what he was going to do is he was trying to assemble people to create a kingdom for himself. And Leiv Bezdin, the theft was that he deceived the Bezdin. He went and gathered people with him. His father gave him a note saying that 2 people should come and assist him, and he showed this note to the different Rashi Sanhedrois, and he got from the Bezdin, from Sanhedrin, to come and join him, and Leiv Yisrael. And also he came and fooled Yidden by this, to show them that he's the one that has to come and replace his father as a king, or to take over his father. And the pasuk here quoted, Shenema, pasuk says, Vayignev Avshalom es Leiv Anshe Yisrael. So what happened because of these 3 thefts? Lefichach nitku boy gimel shvatim. So there were 3 shvatim, 3 spears or something similar that was stuck into his body. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Vayikach shloisha. What lashon of the pasuk actually is, Vayikach shloisha shvatim bechapoi vayiskoim beleiv Avshalom. Yeah, like we have it here in the Mishnah, and it was put into the heart of Avshalom. So this is all regarding the negative, how we see measure for measure and the punishment of a person. So too we find regarding the positive and the good. Miriam waited for her brother Moshe when he was placed into the water for 1 hour. Shenem, as the pasuk says, that his sister Miriam stood from far to see what's going to happen with him. Therefore, so the Yidden also waited for her 7 days in the midbar when she had a tzaras. Shanam, as the pasuk says, nasa adi asiv Miriam. The Yidden did not travel until Miriam came back into the machna. Yosef, similar we find in the good. Yosef zachal likbaris aviv. Yosef merited to be the one to go and bury his father. Ve'ein bechav gadol mimeno. There was his brothers, no one that was as great as him. He was the king then. Shanam, it says, Vayal Yosef likbaris aviv. Yosef went and buried his father. Vayal lima gam rechev gam parashim. And all the others that came along together with Yosef, and mi lonu gadol mi Yosef, who's greater than Yosef? Shlonis asik by Ela Moshe. That Moshe Rabbeinu himself was busy carrying the Aron of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. Now Moshe zacha b'asmas Yosef, ve'ein b'Yisrael gadol mimeno, and there's nobody greater than him. Shenema v'yikach Moshe es atzmas Yosef imay. Moshe Rabbeinu took the bones of Yosef with him. Mi gadol mi Moshe. Now also Moshe Rabbeinu had a special merit because of this. Who's greater than Moshe Rabbeinu? Shalonis asik by Ela hamakim. That Hashem himself is occupied with burying Moshe. Shanem, as the pasuk says, Vayikbar Oisai Bagai, that he was buried over there in that valley. Loyal Moshe Buvado, and the Mishnah says this is not only said about Moshe Rabbeinu himself, Ella al kol tzadikim. Also regarding all tzadikim, Shenema v'holach lifnecha tzidkecha, the tzadikim come in front of you, kvoid Hashem yaspecha. The glory of Hashem gathers them in. But the Maharsha, I believe, here says that there's still a distinction between Moshe and all tzadikim. By Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem buries him literally and physically, his body. Whereas when it comes to all other tzadikim, the pasuk is saying that Hashem gathers and brings up their neshamas to their place. So the Gemara here begins with the whole story that happened with Shimshon. Taner Rabbanan, Shimshon be'einov mara. So Shimshon rebelled with his eyes. Shenema, that says in the pasuk, Vayemesh Shimshon alaviv. Shimshon says to his father, Oisa kachli, this woman, take for me to marry her. Ki hi yeshara be'einai, she's beautiful in my eyes. And this was a non-Jewish woman, and he saw her with his eyes, and he wanted to marry her. So lefichach, the punishment was mida keneged mida nokru plishtim ezeino. The plishtim, they poked out his eyes. Shenema, as the pasuk says, vayechzu plishtim vayanakru ezeino, they poked his eyes. Frek to Gemara, was this an aveda here when he wanted to marry this woman? But v'aksiv, there's another pasuk that says, ve'aviv v'imai lo yadu ki me'Hashem hu. His parents, his father and mother, did not know that this was really from Hashem. Hashem wanted this. This was the plan, that he should marry this woman. And the point over here was that now he'll be able to be amongst the Plishtim and come and fight with them. And says the Gemara, yes, it was a plan from Hashem. But ki azal miyeh basa yashrusei azal. However, he was following what his eyes saw and what was straight and good for himself, and therefore he was punished for that. Tanya B'lert Nabraise, Rebbe says, Tchilas kol kuloi ba'aza. The beginning of the deterioration of Shimshon was in Aza. Vichach loka ba'aza. And that was also the location where he was punished. Tchilas kol kuloi ba'aza. The first place that he deteriorated was in Aza. The Chsiv, as the pasuk says, Vayelech Shimshon azasa. He went to Aza, Vayarsha misha zayna. And there he saw a woman, a zayna. He got punished in Aza. The Chsiv, as the pasuk says, that he went down in Aza. That was his downfall. Frek the Gemara, but was this all in Aza? In another pasuk it says, that he went down. His downfall was already in Timnas. That's where he married this woman mentioned before. So it wasn't in Aza when he saw this Zaina. And says the Gemara, but chilas kulkulai miya ba'aza. However, a deterioration was dafka in Aza, as Rashi explains. Earlier in Timnos, it was a Yerida, but he married her. Didn't have a relationship with her without marrying her. In Aza, though, he saw a Zaina and wanted a relation with her without even marrying her. And that was the kilkul. The Gemara says, "Vahiachre came, vayeh visha benachal shoyrek ushma Delila," and he saw this woman, he loved her, and her name was Delila. So what the Gemara says, what does this name Delila mean? Tanya Rebbe Rebbe says, Ilmali Nikra Shma Delila, even if her name was not Delila, Ru'uya Isa Shetikara Delila. This name is very befitting for her to be called Delila. What does Delila mean? Dildala es Kaichai. She uprooted, dislodged his energy. Dildala es Libai, she uprooted his heart. Dildala es Maisav, she uprooted his righteous actions. As the Gemara explains, Dildala es Kaichai, she uprooted his power. Dechsiva Yasa Kaichai Miyalav. She took his power away from him. Dildlas libai, she uprooted his heart. Ki gidla is called libai, that he shared with her his secret that was on his heart, the secret of what his superpower was, as the Gemara will soon say. Dildlas maisav, she also uprooted his actions, his righteous actions. The stalik shchina, as we see, the shchina was removed from him. That the shchina has been removed from him. Now the pasuk says, "Vateira delila ki higidloi as kol liba," that he told her everything that was on her heart. Mina yada, how did she know? She wanted to know what was the secret of his mighty strength that he had. And finally, he told her that he's a nazir. He doesn't drink wine and he doesn't cut his hair. So Amar Avchanan says, "Omarav nikoren divrei emes," that you can see, it's recognizable, the words that are true. And she saw, it made sense, it fit with the fact that he has long hair and he doesn't drink wine. She realized that this is the truth and this is the source of his strength. Abaya says, she knew that this tzaddik, he does not say Hashem's name in vain. As soon as he said to her that I'm a nazir for Hashem, and she used Hashem's name, Amra, she said, now he must be saying the truth. Then the pasuk says, she would cause him, oppress him, and she would cause him terrible things in order for him to admit to her what it is that the source of his strength is. How was she what was she doing to him that bothered him so much? Rabbi Yitzchak, the Bei Rebbe, Ami, so Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Ami said, B'shas Gemar Bia, at the end of the relationship with him, Nishbeta mitachtav, she would slip away from him. That's a time when the taiva is the strongest, and then she slipped away from him. And that's what caused him the Bataltzeu, she pressured him this way. Va'ata hi shomrini, now this is what the Malach tells the mother of Shimshon. Va'ata hi shomrina, be careful, val tishti yayin, don't drink wine, v'sheichar, the older wine, val teichli, kol tomei, don't eat anything that's tomei. So this is what the Malach tells her, and also for Shimshon that will be a nazir. So the Gemara explains what it means when he says, don't eat what's tomei. My kol tomei. What does it mean when it says, don't eat what's tomei? V'su, an additional question on this is, ad hashta dvarim tmeim ka'achla. Until this point, she was eating things that are tomei, that are not kosher. What this means is additional things that are also for the nazir. Not only wine, but as the Gemara says in nazir, even when you have bread or other things that are soaked in the wine, has wine in it, also becomes also like the wine itself. That's what the David Tameh is referring to. Now the pasuk there says regarding Shimshon, Vayivka lekimis hamachtesh asher balechi. There was the donkey that he was riding on, and Hashem opened up a cavity where the tooth of this donkey was in, and from there came out water. This is a case when Shimshon was davening, he was very thirsty after he killed out many Pelishtim, he was very thirsty, and this is the miracle Hashem performed for him, that the water came from this donkey. Rabbi Yitzchak, the Bei Rabami, so Rabbi Yitzchak Bei Rabami says that there's something negative about this, because hu iva l'dova tomei, he desired to have a relation with marrying a non-Jewish woman, something which is tomei. So therefore he got his life from this donkey. That's where he got the water, and otherwise he would have died he would have died because he had no water. When the pasuk speaks about Shimshon, it says that Hashem's spirit rested upon him. What does this mean? Vatachel also means that now it took effect. The prophecy of Yaakov Avinu, the Chsiv, as the pasuk says, "Yehi don nachash alei dorech," that the shevet of Dan will be like a snake on the way to go and fight with the Goyim. And this was Shimshon. Lefamai b'machne Dan. What does the word lefamai here mean amongst the camp of Dan? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak de Bei Rabami, melamed shayis shchina mikashkeshes lefanav kizuk. This means that the shchina was going ahead of him like a bell. And how do we know lefamai is a bell? Because Ksiv hacha lefamai b'machne Dan. Oksiv Hasam, and then there's the pasuk that it says by the me'il that the Kohen Gadol wears pa'amayin v'rimayin. So the pa'amayin are the bells. Now the pasuk in that same pasuk concludes and says ben tzira or ben eshtoil, that he was between tzira and eshtoil. What is tzara or ben eshtoil? What does this refer to? Omer Avasi tzara ve'eshtoil shnei harim gedolim hayu. These were two big mountains. Va'akaran Shimshon uprooted them v'tochnan zeh b'zeh, and he ground them one with the other. This was to show his might, that everyone should be afraid of him. And he began to save Yidden. What does this mean? The word Yachel, sorry, does not only mean that he began, but it also means that now the oath that was made between Avraham Avinu and Avimelech was desecrated, was nullified. This was an oath that said, Avimelech says that if you're going to not keep this shvuah for me, for my grandchildren, not to bother them. So over here, though, this shvuah was nullified because the Plishtim were fighting with the Yidden. So therefore, if they bothered Yidden, so Yidden were able to fight back. Now the pasuk says regarding Shimshon, "Vayigdal anar vayavacheu Hashem," and the lad grew up and Hashem benched him. With what is he benched? Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav shebirchei ba'amasai. He was benched with his amma, with the aver of the bris. Amasai kibnei Adam. It was the same like all people, but v'zarai kanachal sheitev. However, the zera that comes out and for the children that he had was kanachal sheitev, like a flowing river. This was the greatness of Shimshon. Just, of course, to conclude regarding this, as we'll see here in the Gemara, we see in the continuation of how great Shimshon was. So what it talks about over here regarding his downfall, everything has to be understood relative to his greatness. That whatever the Gemara describes here is all bedakas, to be taken to a subtle degree when you understand who Shimshon really was, and which did eventually bring his downfall.